Awesome. And we are live. Dylan, how are you doing today?
Doing good. I love talking about offers, Liam.
I know you do. That's why we're excited for this one. So thank you everybody for joining this edition of Ecom Weekly Live. So we're diving into a really important topic today, which is building winning offers that scale. One of Dylan's favorite topics. I think I've heard him rant about this countless times. So I think he's going to have a lot of good points to chat through today, and we got some good stuff to share. So we'll dive right into it. Today's goal is really learning how to build winning offers that scale and really understanding what game your D2C business is playing. So a very important thing that we're going to touch on is the fact that when you look at offer strategy and developing offers, you have to look at that within the context of what game your business is actually playing and how that actually impacts the offers that you develop and the economics of everything. So we have a lot of good stuff to cover there. That's the goal of today. Quickly to intro the speakers here. So we have Dylan and myself, both co-founders at Apple Group, or excuse me, founding partners at Apple Group and co-founders at Allen. Apple Group is a direct consumer growth firm. We provide services across the marketing, finance, and software side to direct consumer brands, scaling anywhere from low seven figures to high eight figures. The areas we specialize in: paid acquisition, retention, creative, and financial modeling and forecasting, with some other services on the landing page side, etc. Allen is a tool that allows you to run email like ads managers. So feel free to check that out at the end of the presentation. We'll send everybody attending a special link here with a special offer for Allen. But this really allows us to maximize revenue per recipient with one-to-one email personalization at scale, and allows Allen to serve assets and combinations of assets to subscribers in real time based off what it believes is going to convert best. Within Allen, we also have some inventory-powered product feeds, demand planning, etc. So feel free to check this out afterwards. But with that being said, we'll get right into the presentation here in the webinar. So three main things on the agenda. We're going to talk about, again, what game are you playing? So really identifying, in our opinion, the three core buckets or the three core games in the direct consumer space, and kind of identifying which one you fit in. We'll then talk a little bit about what we call the incremental trap. And then lastly, we'll be focused on diving into building offers and AOV versus LTV optimization. So really diving into different offers based off of the game you're playing and how to kind of think about the framework to construct those. So first, we're going to touch on what game are you playing. So every single business in the D2C space is playing a different game and often fits into one of these three buckets. So the first one is the high LTV/consumable game. So this is kind of the classic subscribe and save model. You're functionally acquiring customers with the expectation that they'll repurchase repeatedly over months or years, typically done through subscription ideally, and you're typically willing to accept thinner or negative order one economics to get them in the door. Retention, repeat purchase, and subscription really is the business model. So oftentimes when you think about building offers here, you're looking at how many people can actually get in on subscription versus one-time purchasers, because typically that's going to be the winning funnel. And of course, ensuring that they subscribe long-term as well. The second game here is what we call the high SKU count/apparel game. So if I go back to the kind of the first game actually really quickly, you'll often see brands there in the supplement space, cosmetics, food and beverage, CPG, etc. The second game is what we call the high SKU count and apparel game. And this really operates, in many cases, close to break even on acquisition, the new customer economics, ideally creating positive contribution margin. But a lot of that LTV and contribution margin comes from returning customers buying products over a long tail. Retention is very critical, but a lot of that retention and return customer contribution margin that's created is really driven through product drops rather than replenishment cycles, and of course, good retention marketing. The third bucket is what we call, the new customer dominant game. So this is where you're selling perhaps a durable good with a healthy AOV and strong first order profitability. LTV exists, but it's very modest and very slow. The retention side of things is a bonus, but it's not really the engine that drives the business. You're very focused on new customer acquisition and really ensuring that you have good AOV and strong first order profitability. Think of brands that are selling things like mattresses, for an example, etc. So those are the three games. Everybody attending that runs a D2C brand likely fits into one of these three. If not, feel free to comment where you believe you sit, but these are the three main games that we see. Anything there, Dylan, on your end to add before we get into more of the meat of the workshop?
Let's keep it rolling.
Perfect. Awesome. So with that being said, now that we've kind of set the foundation of understanding what the three games are and kind of the different buckets there, and how to kind of think about those games, we're going to talk about something that I know Dylan's going to love to riff off of here, which is really the incremental trap when it comes to thinking about offers and what you should be focusing on. So I'm going to hand it off to Dylan here. Dylan, take it away on your thoughts here, because I know this is a big one for you.
Yeah, so the one of the reasons why it's so key to know what game you're playing is ultimately you don't want to do something that could potentially be counterproductive to the end outcome that you're trying to optimize for. We see this often done for the high LTV businesses where because so many D2C brands do not have great lifetime value, a lot of the best practices are built around businesses that rely heavily on first order contribution margin. So oftentimes offer testing can kind of be almost optimized in the wrong way. Like oftentimes you actually don't want first order AOV to go up. You actually just want to get higher sub and save take rates on order one
Exactly.
or get
Exactly.
AOV down to lower CAC.
Mhm.
So it's important to just understand that offer testing is generally going to be like the most incremental thing you can do. However, it's higher risk. So it's like a small improvement might be like a minor tweak. Maybe it's, copy on your PDP. Maybe it's better creative. But at the end of the day, the thing that has a chance to maybe improve your CAC to LTV by 30% or 40% is probably going to be offer testing. So just kind of remembering that you want to make sure that if you're trying to make a big change, and that's not to say to not go after like minimal small changes because those can add up too. But if you're in a position where you're trying to take some big swings, and ideally you're going to go for some base hits, but you're also going to try to take some big swings, when thinking about what's actually going to move the needle, make sure you're testing offers that make sense in the context of the game you're playing. And that should be your main lever for growth, not creative.
Mhm.
Creative is like blocks and tackles. It matters and it can totally help performance, but it can only do so much. At the end of the day, the offer is king.
It's not the underlying strategy 100%. And I think like you can definitely attest to this, Dylan, but the amount of conversations that I have with brands that are struggling on the acquisition side, and they continuously focus on creative, they're launching new creative constantly, they're testing different creative strategies. But then I ask them the simple question, like, okay, how often have you tested new offers? Like, what is your offer testing strategy? When's the last time you've tested offers? And many times they'll say, we don't really focus on that, or it's been, 2 years since we really developed a new offer. This one's been quote unquote working for us since, but they really do not think of it as kind of, they don't really operationalize the offer testing side. So I know on your
Yeah.
end you probably have a lot to say there too, but it's actually quite shocking. And I think just like in the direct consumer space as a whole, there's so much emphasis focused on creative, which again, like to your point, they're blocks and tackles. It can provide incremental lift. It's very important, but the underlying strategy that creative is building off of is the offer that you're developing and you're trying to run. So it just doesn't get enough focus. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Creative strategy is not your business strategy. It's
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
it's a complementary piece that can
Yeah.
ideally enhance good business strategy, but it's not going to fix bad business strategy.
Yeah.
And like
Great point.
again, like in a couple of exceptions where like you can get lucky and maybe
Mhm.
something goes mega viral, but I also don't consider luck a business strategy. So we want to make sure you're doing these things well, and it's super critical because at the end of the day, if you have really bad ads, it can negatively impact you. But you also have to be realistic about what a good ad can do for you.
100%, 100%. So we'll get into the kind of meat of the presentation here. So this is what everybody attending is probably most excited for from a discussion standpoint, and that's us diving into really building offers and the AOV versus LTV optimization. So we're going to go through the three different games that we talked about and kind of chat through how to think about offer construction for each one of those games, and some ideas about what types of offers typically work. We'll share our perspective from what we've seen, and we'll go from there. So the first one, we're going to touch again on the high LTV/consumable game. So high LTV brands generally want to focus on offers that increase sub and save take rate. So Dylan, you mentioned this a few slides ago. The math, I'll just jump down to this bottom part to highlight this, and then Dylan, I'll let you take it away with kind of your thoughts on offers here that you typically see perform well. But the last piece here, so the math is usually pretty staggering. If your average order one AOV is $100 and your 12-month LTV for non-subscribers is $200 to $300, but your subscriber LTV is 400 plus, you're looking at a customer that's nearly twice as valuable as a one-time purchaser. And we see this all the time, Dylan and I, when we're auditing brands. And if only 25% of first-time buyers are subscribing, the question really isn't how do we improve our email flows to improve retention to drive more LTV from these customers. It's what offer gets the 25% to 50% or 75%. And that's really the game you're playing in the high LTV and consumable space, especially if you have subscription involved as well. So Dylan, I'll hand it over to you here to kind of give your thoughts on that. But this is a very important concept for anybody that's in the space.
Yeah, I think that one of the benefits of sitting in the agency seat is that we see so many brands that we over time accrue an understanding of what is likely the highest leverage thing to go and do based off of
Yeah,
the a current situation of business is in. So I think like anyone can kind of sit down, talk to an AI chat, and or just ponder like a long list of dozens and dozens and dozens of things to try. And all
yeah,
of those things may have some merit and some potential expected value outcome. But what actually has to be done is you have to critically decide what do I believe is the highest leverage thing to go and do, and then rank order them and then tackle them. And you also have to factor in like, like the difficulty of doing something. But ultimately, for high LTV brands, oftentimes if you have to just sit on one problem, it's how do I meaningfully improve subscribe and save take rate without negatively impacting CAC to the point that the gains aren't worth it. So, like, I'll give you one example. If
yeah.
you're a high LTV business and you currently have a PDP, and maybe this is super common, one-time purchase is X price, and then subscribe and save is 10% off, and that's just what you run. Maybe you're getting, I don't know, 10, 15% of orders for new customers to subscribe and save. An example of a low hanging fruit, high leverage opportunity is you maybe change it so that the subscribe and save is 20 or 30% off your first order, and then it renews at 10% off. And you don't have to change your ads. And just by doing that, and maybe by making subscription the default, all of a sudden you take your sub and save take rate from 10% to 25%. And if
Mhm,
that, makes sense from an LTV standpoint, that can be a meaningful change to your CAC to LTV. And a change like that is unlikely to meaningfully impact CAC.
mhm.
The other
Like,
extreme is I'm going to make a landing page that is subscription only, and I'm going to take my sub and save take rate to 70% in doing so, but maybe my CAC goes up by $30. And then you have to do the math based off of the cohort blended average. Is that increase in CAC worth it for the longer term payoff of subscribe and save in that scenario?
mhm,
And you have to kind of think of it. You have like if you're looking at, oh, I have like a 2x of 12-month LTV if I have a subscribe and save in a hypothetical, you kind of want to start with the low hanging fruit, which is how do I get more sub and saves easily without likely negatively impacting CAC? That's like avenue one. And then the other avenue is I'm going to take some big swings and try to get my sub and save take rate to be like 70%, 80%, or insert some high number here. But you have to just double check that generally subscription creates friction and friction can negatively impact CAC. So you just have to make sure that it's worth it. And often it can be.
100%. The one thing to mention here too, Dylan, that is probably very important to call out too. Like when you test these new offers and you do see the acquisition efficiency drop, CAC goes up, et cetera, it's also important to like really look at that in the context of testing this offer and understanding that you have to wait for that LTV to come in. Because if you're just looking at it in an isolated, from an isolated standpoint on acquisition, you might be just looking at that and seeing that CAC has gone up and efficiency's
Mhm.
dropped, and all of a sudden you're like, this is not working, everything's bad, we need to shut this off right away. When in reality, to your point there, if you actually do the modeling and forecasting correct on the back end there on the LTV side, you see that that is a winning offer because you're getting that much higher of a percentage of subscribe and save versus one-time purchasers. So I think we've seen that happen multiple times with brands when we are testing these types of offers, or even just how they're looking at it. And it's so important to actually have that kind of holistic view on it, because otherwise you're never going to probably unlock an offer here that is meaningful for your business to scale if you're only looking at it just on acquisition.
I agree.
Awesome. We'll jump into the next game and kind of how to think about offers here. So that's the high SKU count and apparel game. So high SKU count stores with low to medium LTV generally want to increase AOV. And oftentimes this is done through buy more, save more, and managing the risk on conversion if AOV is going up. So this is particularly relevant to clothing and apparel brands, any store that's really selling something that has, a large SKU catalog. So Dylan, feel free to jump in here with your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the high SKU count game is often not too dissimilar to the high LTV game, with the sole exception of you often cannot lose money on the front end, or if you do, you likely have to lose very little.
Yep.
And the reason why is because LTV can be solid, maybe not as good as a consumable product. However, it's often slow, meaning that the payback is maybe healthy on a longer term time frame, but not great on like a 3 month LTV standpoint. So
Hmm.
oftentimes these businesses at scale get to a place where first order target is kind of to be like roughly break even to like a slight profit. It really
Hmm.
depends because this can be a very broad set of categories from a product standpoint. The one thing I will say is that a lot of the high SKU count categories are often high TAM. Not always, but like you can kind of think of like clothing as an
Yeah.
example.
Yep.
Like everyone wears clothes. Like
Yep.
depending on how niched down you are, sometimes the incrementality of spend in these categories can be very strong compared to some niche CPG brands. Now,
Hmm.
there's exceptions everywhere. So like there's also very broad TAM CPG brands, but generally speaking, oftentimes if you can actually figure out first order profitability, oftentimes scaling here is actually relatively easy. The difficult part of this game is actually inventory planning because of how many SKUs you have. And if
Yeah.
you get that wrong, you can kill your cash flow and kill your growth.
Hmm.
But from an offer standpoint alone, when it comes to high SKU count stores, generally, if you are seeing attrition and acquisition efficiency and you're trying to figure out how you can get more so you can keep scaling, it's usually some sort of a buy more, save more type initiative or anything to get AOV to go up. So, like, buy more, save more, maybe like buy three, get one free. It might be as you buy more, you unlock new thresholds. Maybe you get like a free widget or something, or you get free shipping at a certain tier. Like
Hmm.
you really want to get AOV to go up because in this game, you don't want you often do not want AOV to go down most of the time because if you lose more money on the front end, but you get a lower CAC, you can't really play that CAC to LTV game like a subscription brand. So high AOV is generally the way to go. And that's often also a byproduct of inventory planning. Like if you've made your funnel work with generally products that are $80 and you generally have like a $110 or $120 AOV, I'm thinking about how do I start introducing products into my assortment of SKUs that I sell that are probably $150 plus because I just know there's more margin dollars there. And it's not always as simple as that. Like you can still have winning products that are cheaper in price, but generally in our experience, as stores grow, the stuff they sell tends to get more expensive because they want more margin dollars available for CAC.
And how do you think about product launches for high SKU count and specifically let's talk about clothing and apparel? Like how crucial do you feel a consistent product launch strategy is, not only for acquisition, but kind of particularly for return customers and incentivizing people to come back and repurchase? How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things about clothing and apparel is that they actually have that this category has greater LTV risk due to the fact that clothing often comes in and out of style. So if you actually do not consistently iterate on
Yep.
product, you actually run a higher risk that your future LTV won't be like your past LTV. Where if
Hmm.
I'm selling some consumable food item, most of the time, if people liked it a year ago, they're probably still going to like it a year from now, unless there's some revolutionary change in that food item. Usually doesn't happen. If you had a trendy product that really popped off, and then all of a sudden that trend died down, maybe that next product line has a completely different LTV curve. It's not
Yep.
to say you can't bet on LTV coming true, but you have to be mindful of that. And my takeaway from trying to be mindful from that is that new product is hard. And oftentimes I view it as a game of quantity and quality, meaning like I want to have team members or the founder have the ability to come up with new products that are, generally popular. But I think everyone in this game knows that most new products don't actually crush. So I think that people oftentimes allocate dollars incorrectly in this category. And a lot of the free cash flow that gets created within reason should probably be reinvested into a higher volume of net new SKUs because that can help
Yep.
solidify your LTV for the long term, but also help you to continue to find new winners
100%.
for acquisition.
100%. And I think a good way to kind of look at it as well is that, like, let's say you go from launching one new product a year to 20 new products a year. that's not just kind of like a linear increase in the amount that you're launching. It's an order of magnitude increase in the amount of at bats that you have as a brand to not only find new products that might stick on acquisition, but also on retention to your return customers. And it's so important to do this. If you look at some of the biggest brands out there in the clothing and apparel space, et cetera, just go look at their store. You can look tools like store leads, et cetera, out there. Look at how many new products they're launching. And I guarantee you're going to be pretty surprised at the quantity that they're living on a pretty consistent basis. So incredibly important factor there. We'll jump into the next one. So the last bucket, the new customer dominant game. So this is somewhat similar to our previous slide, but the new customer dominant game is where you're selling a durable good with a very healthy AOV and strong first order profitability. As we mentioned before, LTV exists, but it's typically modest and slow. Retention is not really is kind of a bonus. It's really not the engine that drives the business forward. So somewhat similar to the last bucket, Dylan, but take it away with your thoughts on brands that are really, really new customer dominant. They live and die by new customer efficiency, and most of their business is built on new customer acquisition.
Yeah, for brands like this, the way in which you offer test is by having more new products that are actually functioning on paid, meaning like if I have one core offer and I get to 10 million bucks a year, 20 million bucks a year in sales, and there's no LTV, I'm probably super stressed out as a founder until I find a way to actually get products two, three, four, and five to introduce diversification. And candidly, long term, I think for most businesses that fall in this category, D2C is not where they naturally should exist over the long term. They should probably have a bigger focus on wholesale because those vendors effectively become your recurring revenue because they're basically buying from you on an ongoing basis. There's
Good point.
exceptions. If you
Yeah,
have like good IP or vertical integration or true moats where you think you can actually maintain efficiency at scale or get more of it, there are certainly exceptions where these brands can crush on D2C and in some cases actually build some of the more durable businesses. But if you're just buying like a relatively undifferentiated product and you only have one core offer that's working at scale with no LTV, I would consider the year a failure, even if you grow and are super profitable. If you don't, in the process, also start finding new products that also work, because you're
Mhm.
going to need diversification. Otherwise, the probability is that one of the years in the future, your business will not exist anymore because you will lose the ability to
So
acquire
much
customers
risk.
profitably.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%,
And I,
100%.
I, I say this a lot, but I would rather have a business that can last for 20 years that compounds at 30% a year versus a business that I can grow at 100% a year for 2 or 3 years and then goes out of business.
Yep,
And so
100%.
many of these businesses are the latter. So you have to be very, very mindful of not getting too excited when you put up crazy year over year growths. You have to think about how do I make this thing durable so I can
Yeah.
actually compound and create wealth.
Yeah, you don't want to be sitting on a house of cards, for lack of a better term there. 100%. Yeah. The other thing too to mention here is you talked about like launching products that work on acquisition. This is more of a general comment just when it comes to product launches, but it obviously kind of relates here too. One thing I think people forget is that not every product you launch and develop has to be an acquisition product that crushes on acquisition. Perhaps it might be more of a retention oriented product, and this might not be as relevant for kind of this bucket or this game, unless you're developing products specifically for retention that can boost that return customer LTV. But some products that you launch will not work on acquisition, but they will work very well on retention and bringing people back to buy multiple times. So just a good way to look at product launches there. Doesn't have to always work on acquisition, can be a retention product as well. And not all retention products that work on retention will work on acquisition and vice versa. So small comment there. But we are going to jump into Q&A now. So for all of you that are watching on YouTube, we're going to cut off the video here. Make sure to sign up and join our next Ecom Weekly Live webinars, where we do deep dives into hot topics like this, live workshops, and then we have Q&A afterwards, where everybody attending, we sit down and go back and forth with questions they have. So appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and everybody attending. We will jump into Q&A now.